I'm Mark Mueller. Welcome to Truth and Justice League podcast. I have Elliott Bayev here. Elliott, thank you so much for coming. This I love it when this kind of thing happens. You just happen to be in town and you texted
Mm,
me and you said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And here we are.
Here we are.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah. I work mostly in the impact and systems change space. I wear three hats in that capacity. I run a global impact organization called Global Unity. We've got a very extensive theory of change that's been in development for the last few decades, but we've also built a community of 800 changemakers, social entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, indigenous leaders. Out of that, some network effects emerged. We run an event, Transformative Impact Summit, kind of a TED of impact. It's really a response to the recognition that impact is too siloed. People either focus on clean oceans or financial inclusion or regenerative agriculture. And even when there's a mass gathering that's supposed to bring everyone together, it's a climate week. It's still very narrow in its focus. And so the point of the event is to bring the entire impact ecosystem together to showcase their work, connect them across boundaries, so break down those silos between them, and then provide funders and policymakers with a curated showcase of world class projects. Um, and out of that, we ran last year. So we've run this in Africa, we've run it in New York mostly. And at our event last year, we added a family office, philanthropist, and impact investor only day. And a community emerged out of that we've been stewarding, bringing wealth holders who care, whether they're on the return side or the philanthropic side, and trying to help them see not only how they can make an impact, but how they can transcend impact and really contribute to systems change.
You told me you were a jujitsu guy.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that and how that's affecting the work that you do here.
Yeah, so I've been doing jiu-jitsu since I think 96. I third degree black belt. I've competed for about 20 years. Won a silver medal at the Masters World Championships in 2013. Um, and I own a school in Toronto, open mat mixed martial arts. And when I first woke up to suffering in the world, at first I did what I thought you do. I joined different human rights groups and went to protests and rallies. And then I realized, my wake up was Naomi Klein's No Logo, a book that kind of exposed me to, what is today common knowledge, sweatshops and people suffering as a result of Western consumer habits, we'll say. And then a documentary called The Corporation showed me that we really have a systems problem, and that unless systems change, nothing would really ever change. And so I started thinking about systems change about 20 or so years ago. And funny enough, it was actually jiu-jitsu that gave me what I think are unique tools for thinking about it. Jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is a martial art that um, is fairly unique in that it heavily emphasizes control over violence. So trying to control someone and looking at it really it teaches systems thing. I was in an investor event with this beautiful group called Frequency that brings heart-centered wealth holders together, and I taught an impact jiu-jitsu workshop based on an article teaching like how jiu-jitsu teaches us about systems change. And if one of the things I taught is say you learn how to escape a headlock. You learn a move where you put your arms between your head and the other person's head. You do a series of movements, and then you end up in a position that allows you to disable them with, for those that know what it is, an armbar. The problem is, if they simply, even unintentionally, bring their head towards yours, that move doesn't work. So you have another move where you hook their leg, you flip them over, and you end up in the same scenario. That move doesn't work if their leg is down. And so you have yet another move that gets you into a good spot. So the question is, if you only know the first technique, do you actually know how to escape a headlock? No, because a headlock is not a situation. It's part of a nested series of situations. So unless you know the system of escapes, you don't actually know how to deal with that. So jiu-jitsu, this is an example of 10 or 20 different heuristics that jiu-jitsu inherently teaches that when you're thinking about systems change, you're thinking about the challenges we're going to face. You'll never get everyone to agree. How do you get the hyper powerful to abdicate their power? What do you do about the fact that were there conflicts of interest? Those are going to influence the organizations that try to make a change in the first place. So, two other simple examples I'll share that I think are really important. Say you go in for your first class and you learn what to do when someone grabs you in a certain way. You learn this move, it's super powerful. You're like, wow, that's amazing. Wait a minute. What if they grab you like this? You learn what to do there, and again, it's just as powerful. You're just as inspired. Then you think, oh, okay, well, what if they grab you in a different way? And as this process iterates, eventually you realize, wait, there's actually an answer for everything. It imbues a practical optimism. When we look at the state of the world, it's easy to feel defeated by all the negative things that we're seeing. But if we start with the premise of practical optimism, that there is a way to get into a position, a better situation, that is kind of the foundation of even trying to make a difference. Now, if you have that practical optimism, say you're on the mats and someone keeps taking you down and taking you down, it can feel like you have a problem. But if you have practical optimism, you realize you don't have a problem. Jiu-jitsu is asking you a question. How do you stop that takedown? So mental jiu-jitsu is the art of turning problems into questions. So, okay, you'll never get everyone to agree. Okay, we can, using mental jiu-jitsu, look at that in a few different ways. If we didn't get everyone to agree, could we still create a system that worked for everyone? First, is it actually true that we'll never get everyone to agree? And so the idea of me really being with mental jiu-jitsu as one example of, again, a dozen or so heuristics that jiu-jitsu teaches, helping us reframe and look at impact, systems change, social change in different ways.
Questions are important.
Questions are the answer.
That was the foundation for the movement that I started, Truth and Justice League. Mm-hmm. In 2019, we had a party called the What If Party. And we had it on the summer solstice. And people go, well, that's a strange name for a party. But the genesis of that was I had actually been on a spiritual retreat. And the spiritual teacher, people were at a point where they were bitching about this or bitching about that, and going through the laundry list of stuff and people that they have problems with or things that are a problem in their life. And the group leader, Jose Stevens, said, well, what if instead of seeing it like that, you looked at it this way? Or what if instead of sending that energy to those people of, oh, they're terrible, whatever, what if you just said blessings to them, sent them love? And that started it. So we all started getting into the game of what if. And so when we did the party in 2019, it's very interesting because it's kind of similar to what you've been discussing here. And it was a big idea. It started in one place, was let's have a party on the summer solstice, invite all kinds of different people, and have art and music and dancing and fashion and scientists to talk about chemical pollution and things like this, and have it be all embraced by what if, instead of complaining or instead of just saying thoughts and prayers. That was the time when they were just thoughts and prayers was, and I don't mean to be putting down thoughts and prayers, but thoughts and prayers was basically well, screw you, I don't really care about you, thoughts and prayers. Instead of fixing the problem, thoughts and prayers. So we, at that time in 2019, came out with, well, what if instead of just that, we actually step up and do whatever it is we can bring to the table, whether it's art or whether it's music or whether it's my piece of science or whether it's my piece of entrepreneurship. What if? And we started the question, and the question is important, right? And the follow-ups are important. So it sounds kind of similar, but you sound like you've been in it for a longer period of time.
I mean, you've got such a storied career. We've all been approaching trying to make a difference in different ways,
Yep.
right? And two things come to mind from what you're sharing. One on the questions piece. So I've shared the high level of global unity with more than 800 people. Only once has anyone totally warped my thinking around it, and it was this brilliant philosopher who's now a good friend, Forrest Landry, and who spoke at the event you
Yeah, I
spoke at,
remember the
Transformative
name.
Impact
Yeah.
Summit. Yeah. And he said that because how we make decisions together today is so important, the very act of participating in collective decision making must itself increase the wisdom of the participants. That was hard to wrap my head around, but his process for doing so is called EGP, ephemeral group process. And the idea is even if you had thousands of people, you break into groups of five. And one of the problems with debating is, and there's a management consultant. He was an author, much more than just in the business world. Edward de Bono. I use this example to explain the power of what Forrest created. So he has a practice called the six thinking hats. We're in a boardroom working for a company. We all have the best interests of the company at heart. If I propose an idea, all of a sudden, it's not just whether that idea is good for the company. My ego is attached to that. So if you have a critique that maybe I didn't see and you critique that, all of a sudden I feel attacked. And now we're no longer all working from the same side of the table. So the idea is that everyone puts on a different colored hat, a metaphorical hat. The yellow hat is the aspirational hat. What if this goes perfectly? The green hat is what are the financial considerations? The red hat are the emotional considerations. Black hat is kind of the strict, bare bones, logical, practical side. One other is, worst case scenarios. And so the idea is that now everyone's looking from the same side of the table. We all put on the yellow hat. What if this goes perfectly? What if this goes terribly? We're all what are the emotional implications? So it's a tool for getting everyone looking at the same side. And so back to EGP, ephemeral group process. The idea is you break out into groups of five, and instead of trying to debate and come up with ideas, all you do is try to figure out what are the most important questions to ask. When you're asking questions, it gets everyone looking from the same side of the table. And so you break out into groups of five, you figure out what are the most important questions to ask, you come back after whatever time period to a larger group, you share the most vital questions, and then you do it again. And then you do this over, say, the course of a weekend as an example. So what's happening is not only are you refining the thinking and get everyone on the same page or on the same side of the table trying to figure out what are the most important questions, but you're at the same time building relationships between them all. And so this process of figuring out the right questions to be asking is really important. And questions, when we identify problems, we're kind of stuck in a problem solution mindset. When we're asking questions, we're quest on. We're exploring possibility. The other thing that comes to mind when you're talking about the what if party, you were saying that a lot of people were identifying people they thought were doing the wrong thing and kind of griping about them. And what got me started on this path 20 years ago was one realization, and it was that the principles of success for society should somehow mirror the principles of success for the individual. The principles of success for the individual say you're never going to create success by looking at what you don't like and saying, that's no good, that has to change. And yet what I saw in the impact space, in the social change space, was a lot of protesting. And that might be an important component, but that won't necessarily get us to the world we want. Personal success comes from creating a vision of the you want to be and then working on becoming that. So 3 steps to a better world. Create a vision of what that world looks like, figure out how to get from here today to there tomorrow, and then implement. And so this is there's a beautiful framework from systems thing I'll share later, but this is the idea that unless we know the world we want to get to, how are we going to get there?
I just was sent a link to uh, a, a quick little talk that, you know who Michael Beckwith is?
Yes.
Okay, so Beckwith in L.A., Agape Church, he was talking about breathing into the frequency that you want to be, and the vision of how you want to be and how you want to be in relation to others. And it was really it was beautiful because I watched that, and it was in contrast to what was going on in the rest of social media. The rest of social media, somebody was always wrong. Whether it's Democrats, the Republicans, the Soros, the Nazis, the communists, that was all that kind of stuff going on, and everybody was being stupid or blamed for whatever side of this thing. I found myself, after seeing some of these things going on, I'm getting better at sort of looking back, and I'm not getting too engaged in the back and forth. But I found myself, after hitting all these accounts of what was going on, still getting drawn into it emotionally and draining. It was like I was feeling mentally drained and tired. And after watching Beckwith for 10, 15 minutes, I was like, okay, I feel better. And the feeling of frequency and the holding of the vision. And his message was very much about creating this frequency and this vision, and then understanding that we're all in this together, and wishing love and healing on behalf of all these people here that are players in this whole situation. So it wasn't about removing somebody from their position or taking them off to jail or indicting them or any of that stuff. It was a very healthy, and I think what you're getting at is the same kind of a thing. How do we do it? Yeah.
So there's a lot there, but to keep it simple, if we go back to that idea of like, okay, 3 steps to a better world, create a vision of what that world looks like, figure out how to get from here today to there tomorrow, and then implement, where are we supposed to do that? Where's the place that we all come together to design what the world should look like? It doesn't exist. So we have to build it. And this is the idea that right now, the only people in history who've ever designed society have been monarchs or intellectuals or secret societies, if you want to go down that path. But we kind of haven't had the tools for the average person to contribute to this. And so this is where we need new tools. And there's some really powerful innovations happening in democracy, in governance, lot in the Web3 blockchain space. People are experimenting with different things. So I think what we need are new tools and places through which we can co-create a vision, because if you or I were to share a quote-unquote perfect vision of what a better world looks like, who's going to buy into that if they haven't had the chance to share their voice? So we need to create spaces where this can happen, and that's part of what we're endeavoring to do with Global Unity. One of the tools that we're developing is specifically that, a crowdsourced civilization design platform. There's a line, I think it's maybe Emerson, everyone articulating the kind of government they would like is one step closer to having it. And a lot of us have not put in that energy to articulate what is the world we want. And yet I think we would recognize it if we saw it. I don't know if there's anyone you want to starve. There are many of us who feel that way. There's no one we actually want harmed, right? There are people who want things to be better. but they're not working together right now. They don't have the tools to work together to make sure people everywhere are taken care of. I think we can all agree on certain like base levels. Don't you want food, water, shelter, and everything else for everyone? Simple enough, right? So there's the process of articulating that vision together, which has to be something that we build. That is like, where's the public global town hall where if you have an idea that can better society, here's where you can contribute it to the open conversation that we're all part of. That doesn't exist yet, so let's build that. The other piece is, even if 8 billion people today agreed we want everyone taken care of, we don't actually have the infrastructure in place to make that happen. So we have to design these tools, these systems, to actually get not just food and water and shelter. These are, of course, the basics, but there's a loneliness epidemic in North America and many other places, right? One of the areas of focus for this podcast is mental health. It's, we came up as a species in tribes, and now we are living these atomized societies where we're just going to our jobs and cut off from family, cut off from community. So, and this kind of informs what kind of society we need. We need one that provides not just the physical needs, but the social, the purpose needs, etc. So you also ask, like, how do we do it? How do we create this vision together? Who's we? When we talk about, oh, we need to change, or we've done something wrong, like, people use that term as though we are a collective organism that is working as a cohesive unit that has done good or bad or will do good. We're so disconnected. We're so disjointed. And
well, so let me just pick at that for a second, because I do say the we, and when I am fully present, I realize we are one, and there is this whole thing, right? And then I forget.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is beautiful. So I want to touch on a couple of things here to loop back with you about, and that is one of the most frustrating things for me personally is I'll be working really hard on something for a while, and it feels like I'm not making any progress. And then I'll have periods where I'm not being productive at all. And so when I'm speaking with other people, they're going through similar things like this. So there's a whole lot of folks that are feeling like we're not reaching our potential. We're not getting, we're getting sucked into things here. I think it got worse during the COVID lockdown because that, as you mentioned, there was lockdown and isolation. So the isolation increased for people, and there are a lot of people who are now adapting to whatever that was about, and whether they're taking medications or they're experimenting with supplements and protocols, or whether they're getting energy work done or whatever. There's a tremendous amount of focus on, holy moly, I want to get right with myself, first of all, because I'm not functioning the way I should be physically or mentally. You seem to be a healthy guy. How you do it?
We're all working. We all have areas of strength and areas to grow. The first thing is, one thing I want to caution is, sounds like there's a little bit of self-judgment, not necessarily from you, but when we talk about, oh, I'm not productive, it's as though our worth comes from only being productive, right? So I just want, and specifically that goes back to...
Oh, thanks for pointing that out. I understand. That's chipping away at myself.
Right. And when you talked about Michael Bernard Beckwith, you watched his video and you just felt better, right? If you wanted to make a difference in the world, your capacity to do so is actually a function of your energy levels. And so if you're watching things that drain your energy levels, it be, quote unquote, because you care and you don't want to ignore what's really happening and people suffering, if it drains your energy, your capacity to make a difference when your energy is lower, the secret to jiu-jitsu. How is it that a smaller person can overcome a bigger person? Positioning. From a good position, things are easy. From a bad position, things are hard. If your energy levels are low, you're in a bad position. When your energy levels are higher, you're just in a better position to do whatever you're planning to do. If you are judging yourself for not being productive, you are now that's not to be it's not an excuse to be totally undisciplined, but the point is that a lot of us who care tend to we have a few things in common. We tend to be harder on ourselves than we are on others. We tend to not be great at asking for help. We tend to not be great at promoting the good work we're doing. And so the first thing I'd say is just to be cautious of that, because a book that was quite influential for me is a Chinese philosophy book, the Tao Te Ching. They talk about this idea of being compassionate with yourself. It's so easy for those of us who want to be kind to be good to everyone in the world, minus one. That's a silver medal. Gold would be to exclude no one. And if you really care about those around you, what's the best thing you can do for them? Give them a good example. What's beautiful synergy that is? That the best thing you can do for anyone else is to actually be kind to yourself, because then you're modeling what it looks like. What do we want for them? To be good to everyone except themselves? No, of course not. So, this is the beauty of, I think, the nature of social realities, that by being kind to ourselves, we show others, A, it's okay, and we're actually more energized. So if we want to make a difference, we're in better position to do that.
That is a great lesson. Thank you. This is interesting how it's taking a turn here. It's imperative that we love ourselves and forgive ourselves immediately on any perceived things that we're not good enough or this or that, for exactly the reason you're saying. It's a distraction, it's an energy drain, and it's stopping us from being who we really are and having the most impact that we can have.
Yeah, and I think so many of us as well don't have good role models of good, confident people. There's this idea, at least in the West, that like confidence is arrogance. And so a lot of us who care deeply and have like for me, you're a hero. You've dedicated your life to standing up for people who are in terrible situations often. And so, but folks like yourself, like, I'll own it, like me, who really care and are dedicating our time and lives, it's almost like we don't know how to operate unless we're taking the role of the humble guy. And that doesn't help. I was one of the, leadership teachers at this frequency investor event that I was just at, talked about like excess humility is just another form of ego, because it's drawing attention to how humble we are, right? And it's just a distraction. One of my favorite quotes is, selflessness is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And when we're not spending time talking about how humble we are or emphasizing that, we have more energy to do the work. And I think there's a lot of, I've been blessed recently. This girl I've been seeing has just been helping me kind of recognize, I do care deeply, and I have dedicated decades to making a difference. And I just, as an automatic process, I would always talk about, but I haven't done this and I haven't, just wasting so much. Right. Of course. Right.
Here I am. Right.
Yeah. I hear that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where we can be powerful reflections for each other. I don't just mean you and me, but all of us who care, connecting with each other. Yes. Right. So it's, and this is also where, community stems from communing. Coming together, opening up with someone else, and by one of us sharing our troubles, our insecurities, our frustrations, our challenges, we actually let others know it's okay to have those. You're not a weirdo for struggling. You're actually doing good for the other person. And so I think this becomes a really important part of change, uh, and a movement building. We need to build relationships, and the whole idea is that we talked about systems thinking a little in the jiu-jitsu context. You are not. I had a really interesting conversation recently. Everyone talks about indigenous wisdom and how important it is. And I struggled for a long time because I was like, okay, what is it? Like, give me an example. And Forrest Landry was the keynote at our first Transformative Impact Summit online, and gave some brilliant examples. Collective decision making is something that indigenous communities have really mastered over the millennia. But there's this idea that one thing I'm really interested in is how do we translate more esoteric, spiritual, embodied knowings for people stuck in rationalism or rational mindsets, because it seems like they have trouble here. I'm a recovering rationalist, I like to say, and so this idea that in indigenous language and practices, you are not an individual the way we think of it in the English language and Western concepts. You are part of a family, a community, the land, and that to the rational mind just sounds like can sound like woo woo mumbo jumbo. But if you think in hardcore neurological terms, by sitting in the belief or recognition that you are part of something, you are actually engraving more neural pathways. So even if it was nonsense, even if there is no metaphysics of interconnection, just the fact that sitting with that recognition changes your brain's capacity is, for me, something that feels somewhat undeniable even to the rationalist mind. And the idea that in the West, we live in objectivism, right? Like we are just objects, and the chair is a chair, and it's isolated. It's not alive. It's not thinking. It's not conscious. And but what we are not just a collection of cells. We are a living system, and we are a living system within living systems. We are part of communities. We are part of families. We are part of nations. We are part of species. We are part of the earth. And so this understanding of interconnectivity becomes really important, and thus our relationships and fostering relationships and nurturing relationships becomes a really important part of systems change. And it sounds like the softer side, but this is where unless we form stronger bonds with each other, we're not going to be able to make a greater change in the world. No, there are no, the hero's myth is a myth. The isolated soul hero might have been appropriate in the past. It's not going to get us where we need to go. I think Thich Nhat Hanh says the next Buddha is a Sangha. Sangha means community. The next Buddha is not going to be an individual but it's actually going to be all of us together. There's this part of our work is we need, the way we introduce global unity. Imagine humanity were really working as one cohesive organism. Where's the platform that facilitates that? It doesn't exist. So we have to build it. The problem is, even if all the platforms and tools and tech were in place, unless there's a mindset shift or a cultural shift, nothing changes. So Global Unity has two branches. A set of platforms designed to facilitate global coordination and collaboration, but necessarily also a movement building strategy designed to get us to the critical mass and cultural shift necessary. And one of the pillars of the movement building strategy is memetics, the spread of ideas. A meme coined by Richard Dawkins, not the internet meme like we think of as funny image, but a meme is like a mental gene, an idea virus, right? And if we're really going to build a better world, we're going to have to build a global movement. If we're going to build a global movement, it's not going to be with the specialized language that intellectuals use that are very hard for the average person to appreciate. We have to speak the language of the everyday person. But who's going to read a plain language 60-page paper? We also have to engage the media through which people are digesting information, like Twitter threads, Instagram memes, YouTube videos. But that's less than half the battle. Because all these brilliant ideas that are important to building a better world, they speak to the mind. If we're really going to build a better world, we have to also speak to the heart. How? If we're going to build a global movement, if we're going to get the average person on board, it has to be through speaking to the heart. How do you do that? Through art and story, poetry, narrative, song. And so one of the memes that is tied to our kind of technological platforms, but one of the ideas, one of the concepts is in the X-Men comics. Why is it that they have superpowers? Because it's not magic. They're the next step in evolution. Not Homo sapiens, Homo superior. The next step in evolution is not going to be on the level of the individual. It's going to be on the level of the species. The next Buddha's a Sangha. The real Homo superior is a united humanity, which is a beautiful idea, but begs the question, where does the earth fit in with all this? We have a beautiful idea of the earth, Mother Earth. But no matter how much you love your mother, you are not your mother. Part of what's gotten us into today's predicament is this idea that we're separate from the earth. What we need is a new idea, a new concept, a new identity. Not Homo sapiens, not Homo superior, Homo Gaia, a united humanity itself united with the earth. And so, if we can spread ideas like that, many of us embody that. You embody that, right? You're trying to help people everywhere. You're trying to help the earth. So many of us are doing that without giving it a name, but a name, and not that is the meme and we all have to get around it. Even that idea is outdated, that there's going to be one concept to rule them all. Many of us are embodying it, but the reason to spread ideas like this and to give them names is they act as flags. They act as, when they resonate with people, you're drawn to Michael Bernard Beckwith. There's an energy to how he shows up. There's an energy. It gives you a place to know, okay, I belong here. And so I think it's really vital. I know we're going into a number of different branches, but it's vital to be compassionate with ourselves. It's vital to connect with others. And it's vital to, one of the things I've really appreciated, I was just at an impact hub for wealth holders and impact professionals working on systems change, this beautiful place in Tuscany, Villa Gaia. And one of the things I appreciate there is they're working on systems change, real, grand scale, change the world stuff, but they've got their feet on the ground. They're thinking very practically. You've been in the impact justice, social justice space for so long. There are a lot of beautiful hearts who maybe don't have practical solutions. Helen Sloch, who spoke at Transformative Impact Summit, she's another hero lawyer who's personally responsible for getting fracking banned in New York. She has such a beautiful expression. Big heart, strong back. And it's the balance between those two that matters. So, a lot of us are just focused on, what are the tools we need? How are we going to use tech or AI to create new capabilities? Those matter. But so does the aspirational side. But conversely, the aspirational side, let's build a better world. Yes, but let's build practical plans for how to do it. So for me, it's that we have to be working on both simultaneously. And I want to say, we were talking about folks protesting. When people are suffering and being harmed today, I understand the instinct to step up and say, hey, that's got to stop. I don't want to poo-poo that, and it might be necessary. I just don't know that it's sufficient. And so unless we do work on the other side, what is the actual world we want, I don't know that we'll get there.
You were mentioning a little bit about you were in Europe doing some kind of work with, I don't want to say the wrong words here, community building or something like that. What were you doing over there?
There's a there's a property, Villa Gaia, that some friends who are in the systems change space have taken over. It's a beautiful 24-acre property, and we all know the power of being in person for so much, for emergence, for collaborating much more quickly, for building trust versus, say, having Zoom calls. So my friend John Andrea has brought together a number of folks focused on systems change to live together for at least a year, maybe two, at this beautiful property. And they are doing some really fascinating things. They've got a purpose-based AI tool called Hive. They have, I use the term wealth holder to refer not just to investors, but philanthropists or family offices, anyone who is coming from wealth and wants to, in this case, do good with it. And so folks in that space, and all of us more broadly, but they're thinking about how do they use their position to make a difference in the world. And, we can see that the rate of destruction is outpacing the rate of regeneration. And so investing in impact projects or technological solutions, it won't be enough. I mentioned that we run our own investor community, Transformative Ventures, that grew out of Transformative Impact Summit. And when we had our first call following our family office and impact investor gathering in New York, we shared with them that, we're thinking about what is this going to be? Is this going to be a membership? There are all these like really cool investor communities like Frequency I mentioned, Nexus, Top Tier Impact, GIN, Global Impact Investment Network, and Tonic in Europe. They basically have memberships where people pay a few $1,000s a year to be part of this community, and we're thinking, okay, is that what we're going to do? Is that our model? And when you're thinking about that, you're thinking, what are we going to charge? You're really thinking about what do they want? It doesn't matter what they want. What does the world need? The world needs three things. It needs the good that's happening to amplify. It needs the harm that's happening to reduce. And both of those, a lot of these investor networks, they share investment opportunities. They share deals. Both of those, you can amplify the good and reduce harm by investing in deals. You can invest in regenerative projects, innovative, technologies in whatever space, and you can invest in things that say clean up the oceans or sequester carbon, things like that. So you can do those first two things, amplify good and reduce harm through investment or philanthropy through funding. But what are we going to do? 10x, 100x, a million x the amount of good deals out there? Nothing's going to change really unless the third thing is in place. It has to be part of a larger plan. And so it so happens that Global Unity has a larger plan, but it's really important. I mentioned this group Frequency. They've got a pretty extensive theory of change. And when I was first introduced to them, what I appreciate about them, what I'm looking for when I'm looking for those focused on systems change, is not only do they, we talked about earlier, big heart, strong back. So they have to have huge aspirations, but practical plans. But the third vital component, they have to have the humility to recognize they don't have all the answers. One of the problems of kind of what I would call colonial thinking, Western thinking, rationalist thinking is this idea that it's like the Silicon Valley mindset. We've got all the answers. And what I appreciated about Frequency and the folks at Villa Gaia is the recognition that no one has all the answers. And so we have to be able and willing to collaborate. And so the idea that we need to move the needle forward. We need to move the needle. We need to move things forward by getting investors, wealth holders, to, whether it's in investment or philanthropy, we need them to fund things that are doing good. We need them to fund things that are going to reduce harm, but it has to plug into a larger plan. And so one of the really brilliant things they're doing at Villa Gaia, John Andrea with one of his colleagues, Julia Becker, who started a movement called Regen Tribe, that really like brilliant systems thinkers. I was sharing that wealth holders everywhere recognize rate of destruction is outpacing rate of regeneration. And so investing in impact projects is not going to change things. We have to be thinking on a systems level. And who, we talked about the secrets of jiu-jitsu is positioning. Who's better positioned to make a difference than those who have, significant wealth behind them? But recognizing we have to be thinking on a systems level and working on where's the guidance on how to do that? Where's the guidance on, or the community to help facilitate that? Where's the mentorship on that? And so Villa Gaia, along with their backer, who's a really beautiful soul, also writes poetry, and his wife paints the most beautiful paintings, kind of showing what he paints. But they have created a wealth holder systems change mastermind. Really small groups getting together for 6 months to help wealth holders understand what is systems change and how do we actually use our position as investors, as philanthropists, to move the needle. So that is one of the really brilliant things that they're doing. And Villa Gaia has been described, or I've been doing some communications consulting and trying to help them articulate the power of what they're doing. And it's an impact hub bringing wealth holders, impact orgs, and impact professionals together to collaborate in person on systems change. And so, again, they've got this wealth holder mastermind. They've got the villa itself, which is a prototype. It would be amazing to have something like that in Austin, to have that all over the world, where folks who are really working on grand scale, and when I say grand, I don't mean, flighty. I mean global scale change and system creation. Those hubs need to be everywhere because, again, having Zoom calls versus being in person with people, there's no comparison, right? And so giving those folks who are working on the greatest challenges of our day the ability to live in person, live together, and iterate together on building new systems becomes vital. They've got, as I mentioned, this purpose-based AI platform, Hive, that they're using in their backers' businesses, but really can be powerful for connecting all of impact together. And that's some of what Global Unity is working on as well. So I've been going there to support their work and learn from them, share some of what we're doing, and really try to break down the silos between all of impact.
How long were you over there for?
This time a month. I was there in February for a few weeks. So they have, sometimes they'll have events or retreats where folks can go. It used to be something where, so long as you were somewhat aligned or in the space, you could just go, but it's a lot of energy to host guests. So they're way more selective now about who's able to visit. But again, this is not the only one. They are, in my experience, one of the leaders in the space, but there's met a woman at the Frequency event who's moving to San Francisco, where there are 8 condo buildings that have been taken over for this or bought by a backer for this purpose. And I think this is maybe, I don't know if we've articulated it explicitly, like impact is important, but impact is not enough. We have to be thinking about systems change. And even change is, I don't like the word change in this context because there's that Buckminster Fuller quote, which is often summarized as change comes not from destroying the old, but creating the new, which, by the way, is often attributed to Socrates. But that is, just for those watching, that is actually Socrates, the character in a book called The Peaceful Warrior. So I was quoting it as though it was the
Oh,
original
that
suck.
book, The Peaceful Warrior. I remember
Yeah.
that. Was it Dan Milgro? Or
Milman, yeah.
Yeah, Millman.
Yeah, really important as an athlete who has gone through like debilitating injuries. That was actually a really important book. But that quote, "Change comes not from destroying the old, but creating the new." Um, I think the new is hiding in plain sight. If we're really going to build a better world, it's going to start by weaving this one together. And so even the idea of systems change, as though we're going to change this system into something, no, it's system emergence, system creation.
Yes. Okay.
We need a new system, but I don't think it's not change. It's not creation. How many people out there like yourself are dedicating their lives to making the world a better place, have created incredible technologies, projects, communities that are doing real good, all isolated from each other?
Maybe we're making it too hard. As part of all this, sometimes we forget that this is, in fact, a level of play. And 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 what you were just saying about maybe it's already here, and we're just needing to unveil it, to see it, to, as you said, maybe to weave it in.
Mm.
But it's, we're not looking for something out there.
Mm-hmm.
It is,
Mm-hmm.
it's already here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's already here someplace if we alter our way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm. So you used, I think, a really important word, weave. It is there, but it's isolated. The fact that it's not just that we can't see it, it's that it can't see itself. So what's needed is impact cartography. We need to map out what is being done. How much redundancy is there when 2 or 1,000 amazing organizations are trying to focus on the same impact in the same geography? So having a global map awareness of all the impact efforts would be a first step. Then there is the act of weaving it together, finding collaborations, finding synergies. And this is, I talked about jiu-jitsu can teach us a lot about change and systems change. A lot of martial arts say, okay, these are our techniques. We're going to stick to this. We don't take anything from any other art. Jiu-jitsu really embodies Bruce Lee's philosophy of take what works. So if there's a powerful, useful technique in judo, we take it. If there's a powerful, useful technique in wrestling, we take it. A lot of people in impact see the harm that business has created, and so just look the other way. They don't want to use any practices from business, but business is good at getting objectives met. So rather than stay closed-minded, let's look at what do they do that is effective, and adopt those strategies, whether they be marketing strategies, organizational strategies, funnels, and of course we have to be careful. The pushback against that is there's some mind viruses embedded in the utilitarian mindset, the colonial mindset that we can just objectify people, and of course, so be aware of that and don't let those stowaways sneak into your thinking. But at the same time, don't ignore, in The Art of War, which is actually a book about peace, I would argue, but they say, like, feed off the enemy. If you conquer another territory, don't burn their crops, eat them. Don't imprison their people. Treat them better than their people had, and they will want to become part of your organization or your country, we'll say. So this idea of, in private equity, which is a type of investment where they'll buy a whole bunch of companies, and then the more, we'll say, enlightened versions of that, they'll find synergies between the different companies that they own. That skill of finding synergies and efficiencies applied to the impact world would be really useful. So, a lot of folks, I think there are a few threads to tap into here. So one, when I was, I've been working on global unity and the strategies behind it for a long time, for, over a decade. But when I was first getting into the impact world, which was actually hard to break into, and we can get into how that happened, but the way I was able to break into it, so to speak, was I was really useful to a lot of people because I would ask one question: what do you need? And by knowing what people need, I was able to make introductions to the more people I met, the more I was able to see, okay, this person might be able to help that person. So I was playing the role of weaver. And it's one of the most important roles, not just in impact, I'd say, in any area of endeavor, business, community, but it's not funded. And so what we need to do are find ways to fund the weavers because they're vital. Though, again, maybe the world we need is already here, but it's just not woven together. So that role of bridging gaps, connecting dots, becomes really important. So this is part of the work we're aiming towards, of finding ways to get weavers who connect dots between different people and organizations funded so they can dedicate their time to that.
What would be the model? What would the model look like?
There are a few different ways. I mean, ultimately, the easiest way, and there's some, the easiest example and the easiest way, although there's some regulatory restrictions, is when someone introduces an investor to an investment opportunity. The problem is they have to be in the U.S. a broker dealer,
Right.
and
To take a piece of the
exactly right. So the laws actually restrict that from happening, and understandably perhaps because that's on the investment side and people can misrepresent themselves and swindle people. But if you think of, so there are a number of investment firms that are trying to be impact focused, whether the family offices or impact VCs. We ran Transformative Impact Summit at Africa in Zanzibar. And there was a group there, threefold, who were doing some really brilliant work. We could talk about Africa and how abused it is by the West, the banking system, the infrastructure, telecommunication systems. So threefold is doing some really powerful innovation to really decentralize and offer not only true networked internet for the people, but citizen-owned infrastructure, whole other discussion. But they were gifted, because of the really beautiful work they're doing, they were gifted 100 hectares by the government. And part of their plan was to create an impact-focused venture studio on it. And I told them, I know 8 or 9 other groups doing the same thing. What's more powerful than an impact-focused venture studio? A network of them. But even that is still very privately interested. But if you did that, put that together, where you had a network of 8 or 9 place-based, impact-focused venture studios that are innovating on new solutions, creating new technologies, have physical hubs, for a conglomerate like that to have 1 or 2 people with 6-figure salaries whose role it is not only to go find new investment opportunities. Here's the problem. If I go find a new if I go meet someone in my role as someone who's scouting investment opportunities, and they're not good for the central organization that's paying me, there's no incentive, there's no mechanism for me to even want to introduce them to someone that I know might be useful for them and might move the needle for the world. So I don't quite have the right word for it yet, but what's more powerful than a network of impact-focused venture studios? A quilt factory, meaning to have 2 or 3 people on a high salary who, yes, are scouting new investment opportunities, but when you meet someone that isn't quite a great investment opportunity, still be rewarded for doing good for the larger impact ecosystem by just making introductions. And this is it. We're stuck in these siloed mindsets of private interest. I can only give to things that serve my organization, which we understand, people have to pay the rent, and even to go on a bit of a rant, I think there's actually, having run family office events and now worked in that space, I think there's actually a big lack of compassion for the space. People think that, your life is perfect. If you complain about anything, you're stuck up, that you're selfish. And, what they don't realize is there's actually a lot of pressure on folks in that space. And even the fact that others are judging you just for being born into the family or being born into, naturally is going to make someone want to put a guard up. And this has been an interesting component of being in the space, that it everyone has problems. And, and especially with families that have a very powerful position, that can put extra pressure and extra dynamics. And many of us don't have the smoothest relationships with our families, even when there isn't this, extra pressure of being a wealth holder family. Notwithstanding that, one of the dynamics we're seeing is that the next gens, the kind of younger generation of wealth holders, are often like held back, not allowed to be involved in family businesses. So you've got this expectation that you're just supposed to be, doing better in the world, but you don't even have the capacity to leverage the position you're in. Notwithstanding, we're like, oh, why don't the billionaires just give away their money? Imagine you're from 4 generations, 10 generations, whatever, of wealth. The pressure to not be the one to screw that up, I can't imagine how immense that is. And so that's kind of a side note. I think we have to relook at how we look at wealth and responsibility and just judgment. But I think also that we need, you were asking about what is the model for funding weavers? Transformative Impact Summit. Once we hit certain thresholds with sponsorship and investment, we're looking to pay weavers to be there, because again, the good is out there. There's so much good happening in the world. People don't know about it, and it doesn't know about itself. So if we can find ways to weave it together, and then, this is maybe more midterm, one of the platforms within Global Unity is designed to create new incentive structures by gamifying goodwill, incentivizing and rewarding actions, activities, and behaviors that benefit individuals, communities, or the world. So imagine you've done good in the world, which you have. You come to me and you want to use the services of my small business, and you say, hey, instead of dollars, can I use these points or these tokens? Only reason I'd say yes is if I was an altruistic entrepreneur, unless I knew my grocer would take those points from me. Then we'd have something new. Then we'd have an economy not based on value, but based on values. Not based on goods, but based on good. Meaning economy. So the meaning economy is an infrastructure we've built underneath everything else, so that when you make a contribution to an idea generation exercise, or you help her generate soil, or you take your neighbor to the hospital, or even meet your own human needs, all of these things do good for the world and so would earn you meaning economy coin. So it's really a mechanism for tethering impact and economy. And so if we had something like that in place, where we reward people not for productivity, but for just doing good, then we can see how weaving automatically becomes something that is easy to reward.
Weavers and connectors, and they're being important to be able to support those folks for, in general, connecting people and doing good things out there. How important is art, and how important is culture, and what's the relevance of that in this new world you're imagining?
Well, I think it's really important to distinguish from my views and that kind of broader conversation we need to be having together.
Right.
So I may feel, and I'm always trying to hedge.
Yeah.
I feel art is vital, but I'm also trying to encourage us to get out of a mindset where we're pushing our own views. So I think what's most important is we have to be asking that question together. Culture, for me, is infrastructure. Culture is foundational to every community, families, country, society. And but we've only ever been the passive inheritors of culture. There are those that push culture, but those are lone individuals again. I think what we need to do, we were talking earlier about this idea of having a collective conversation about what is the world we want. Culture is an important part of that. A framework we use is, we talked about this idea of homo gaia, the earth and humanity as one organism. A way to break that down is body, heart, and mind. Body being the infrastructure, heart being the culture, and mind being education, sense making, how do we make sense of the world, and governance, how do we make decisions together. So that middle part, culture, again, for the most part, we know how culture influences everything. Nazism had a culture. Benevolent communities have a culture. Like, we could take the spectrum. Every society is based on its culture rather than simply be recipients of it. What if we were to consciously design that together? And so we talked about one of the tools, the first platform within the global unity kind of tech side of it, the platform ecosystem. Society OS is a crowdsourced civilization design platform. A vital component of that is choosing the culture we want. So conscious culture, not a culture of consciousness, although that might be great, but a platform, a tool, a process through which we are together co-designing the culture we want. Do we want, and so that for me is, when we talk about art and culture, it's like, first, fundamentally, before I throw my views in that art is important, or this is important, or that is important, we need to be facilitating those conversations together. So we are choosing the kind of society and world and culture we have together. Then we can get into, where does art fit in with all that? And I think we've talked a little bit about kind of the utilitarian Western rationalist model that is all about, that is sometimes embodied by the corporate world of numbers and figures. And there, it's hard to quantify the value of art. But we know, we've talked about, there's a loneliness epidemic, there's a mental health epidemic. And we have also talked about mimetics and the spread of ideas. So one, what is the economic value of people feeling better? Having a painting on the wall that simply inspires you, elevates your life. There is an economic benefit to that if we want to think in those utilitarian terms. But also in terms of spreading messages. We said, if we're really going to build a better world, it's going to require us to build a global movement. We're not going to do that with just speaking to the mind. We have to speak to the heart. Art is such a vital part of that. And so, my personal view is art is vital both as a salve, as a healing thing, as a thing that elevates our lives, but also as a tool of change, right? To try to communicate what global unity is, or what this theory of change is, or that theory of change. Take hours of words. One image, I would love to see artists everywhere try to show what homo gaia actually is. That, why do we want to spread ideas? Because we want to inspire action, and art is one of the most powerful ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. What we did in the 2019 What If Party, we asked the artists to paint something that illustrated a condition we were in or a way to change it. We did that, and it felt good. And I think people came out of the experience in part because of the art, also the music and the fashion and the fellowship and the whole thing. We came out of that, got hit with COVID, kind of sidetracked a lot of things. But one of the things that our Juan, Rosemary, and Eleanor, Niz, and I were hoping to do was to envision what the world that we want to see. and to do that through art. And not everybody's going to do it the same, but to do that on a massive scale. Art people doing it all over the country, sharing their art all over the country, and having it go up on, huge walls and billboards and everywhere, just inundating people with that kind of a thing, and as part of the process. Okay, and it's like, I'd still like to see that happen. So organizing the artist community is another piece of this need for new systems, I guess. What you're saying. We have all these really talented people that really care a lot, and it's just very difficult to make a living, number one, and two, to get your work seen by enough. That's a common thing that we need to work on. I don't know, maybe need's not even the right word, but a lot of the good work is not seen, whether that's poetry or art, or I want people to see these podcasts, because I think a lot of the things that we're talking about, we want to talk about the important things to get people. We want people to be seeing these things and relating to these things and having input and participating in this. And so being seen on a bit large scale is real important. And I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head here, but that's something I would like to try to work on solving.
So when you talk about getting messages out,
yes,
Transformative Impact Summit, we're saying people have, a friend of mine called it the TED of Impact. What is TED? It's not an event. It's a media company. They've recorded thousands of talks, and they're spreading ideas at scale. They have some brilliant impact and systems change projects, but that's just a portion of their focus. We are exclusively impact and systems change. And so we see the role of Transformative Impact Summit being an example of, on the media side, impact infrastructure to amplify the messages of those doing good. So your podcast, you've run X number of episodes, and you have, Y audience level, however many people are watching right now. In a micro way, it's an example of impact infrastructure. There are dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of podcasts that are highlighting really powerful things. But again, they're not part of an impact channel that people know that if they want to find not just the people featured on your podcast, but all people everywhere who are doing good. Here's the way, we talk about mainstream media, think of the words like mainstream. It's like a river of information that is, whether we think of it as good or bad, as a whole, there are similarities in what is shared. What we need to do is foster that same kind of stream for impact. So, or systems change, or those doing good. And we're doing that in micro ways, and we live in an age where throughout history, the only people who ever had the capacity to have the ear of millions of people were monarchs. Now, it will take time, but you can grow a podcast to have 1 million listeners, right? So we have the opportunity, but that whole mindset of becoming the next Joe Rogan or, Chris Williamson or solo superstar, I think we need to break out of that, because, the work you've done in the world is very important. There are others who care, who are doing good work, who are featuring people making a big difference, but your podcast is not connected to other podcasts. We talked earlier about impact cartography. You talk about this gentleman you featured who's able to make it rain. Okay, that's a solution, right? We're working with Fulbright, one of their solutions partners, Global Solutions Institute, Fulbright for those.
Oh, I know the Global Solutions Institute, Mark Mueller.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
we've been helping them put together a global solutions repository or database, right? So that is an example of a really powerful solution that needs to be amplified. People don't know about that. When people are facing drought or forest fire, where's the global database of ways to address that? So that's another example of impact infrastructure, impact media, impact infrastructure. The problem is, if you think of the global solutions database, it's not really a good investment. Where's the return for investors? And philanthropists have the same problem of not wanting to give money to things that are just going to need more money in a few years. So all impact infrastructure, the things that the world, like we can see the global solutions database, it's a thing the world needs. But the fact that our economic system doesn't have isn't incentivized to create it, that's a problem. So we've got solutions for how this stuff actually gets funded, and the short version is you bring together all the impact investment opportunities and skim a little every time an investment is made. If part of that went to fund the larger impact infrastructure ecosystem, then you've solved that problem. But the idea of like amplifying the good, getting the word out about you're doing the work, and like, you know, you have a staff who's supporting you, you've put time and money and energy into this, but you're working in a sense alone. And so there is actually a website, the Good News Network, right? What we need is to amplify things like that, not as isolated entities, but to collate, to coalesce all those who are amplifying messages of good. But the bigger picture, like, what do we want? If we, yes, we need a way to envision a better world. We want everyone to have food. We want everyone to have shelter. You could use any measure of human health, the indigenous wheel of life, Maslow's hierarchy, 5 classes of pleasure. We use a version of Maslow's hierarchy, but who do we not want to have food? Who do we not want to have a sense of community? Like, we have kind of whole views, whole maps of what the human being needs. So what's needed is need cartography. The whole problem with the nonprofit world is you have people in the West who think they know what a community on another part of the world needs. They parachute in what ends up being the wrong solution because they didn't do an effective job of really listening to people. So we need to improve our capacity to listen to people, not just at the country level or the regional level, I would say to the individual. Resource cartography to know what's available, solutions cartography, and then it's just a matchmaking issue. And we have the tools now with AI. I mentioned Hive that Villa Gaia is putting together. It is a purpose-based AI that could solve for all this. So we know that we have the resources, we have the technologies, and we actually have the willingness. One of the arguments some will give in terms of like why humanity working as one couldn't happen, you'll never get everyone to agree. Do 100% of people agree on this society? No, but it still functions. Shows you don't need 100%, which begs the question, what's the magic number? 90, 70, 30% of people? There's Pareto's principle 80-20. Malcolm Gladwell writes about movements start at 3%. Regardless, there are people out there, whether it's 100,000, a million, a billion, there are people out there who want everyone fed. They're just not working together. Today we have the tools for the first time in history to actually facilitate collaboration between everyone. If we could simply give the tools for everyone who want no one to starve to work as one, what's unique about this group is not just about itself, not just about feeding those in the group, but feeding everyone everywhere. Is it not possible to facilitate collaboration and cooperation between those who care about everyone everywhere? I don't think you could argue it's not possible. So this is the work. So yes, we need the tools. This is why Global Unity is a two-branched, two-tiered process. of build the tools to make sure we have the ways to actually take care of everyone everywhere. But then we also, even if we had all the tools that could facilitate humanity working as one, with 3 people using them, doesn't go anywhere. But if we had 1 million people, no tools, no platforms, but a willingness to design them together, we could really get there. And so movement building becomes a vital part of this. And so Global Unity has been in stealth mode for a few years. We're still going to be in that state for a while, but the kind of entry point, once we are ready to receive the energy of those who want to help, will be very low cost, we'll say, low energy support, simply support.
Like the cartography idea, that's one to take away and one to remember later in terms of creating. It's a different form of art.
Mm-hmm.
Elliott, how can if someone wants to learn more about what you're doing and where your projects, your groups, how do they do that?
The public side is transformativeimpactsummit.com or transformative.global, and that's both for the Transformative Impact Summit event that happens in New York every year and across the world. Can apply to be a speaker, can come as an attendee. For the investors and family offices and philanthropists that are watching, also transformative.global. You can reach me at connect@transformative.global or Elliott@transformative.global to apply to attend one of our events, be part of our private community. And then for those that want to know more, again, Global Unity is in stealth mode at the moment, but globalunity.org is where we have a tiny bit of info. We have a mailing list. And then for those who are into jiu-jitsu, if you're in Toronto, I own a Open Mat MMA in Toronto, openmat.ca. We've got affiliates throughout Canada and Bermuda, some really, beautiful space. And last thing I'll say on that is, spending a few years traveling the world focused on impact, I came back to Toronto and to my academy, and I realized, I was always looking outside to do impact. We think of impact as regenerative agriculture or social justice. And I realized, a jiu-jitsu academy in an age when we feel there's a loneliness epidemic, it gives people a healthy environment to come together, to be supported in being healthier, to connect with others. And so I just shout out to my students and my staff who've keeping that beautiful place running, because it really does, and community spaces of all types really do good in the world. So last minute plug, but
and Toronto, thanks for saying that for your group, and you're recognizing your people. Toronto is also a beautiful city, one of my favorites. I haven't been there for a little while, but it's time to go back.
Well,
it's a fantastic place. Thank you so much, Elliott. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise.